precious. Today, as part of our treasure project, I will interview a unique individual who has cut an insane number of incredible stones, entered the Guinness Book of Records, and achieved the impossible by turning the craft of gem cutting into his own artistic genre. With Viktor Tuzlukov, a brilliant master of artistic gem cutting, recognized as the best of the best worldwide. 5 Guinness records, an international victory in Hong Kong, the first gem cutter in world history to have a personal verification in GIA certificates. A very wise and kind person, our compatriot Viktor Tuzlukov, in an exclusive interview with Elena Bulgarina. The Road of Value, I want to introduce you to our amazing guest, a gem-cutting artist, a laureate of numerous competitions, and simply a unique individual. His collection of stones is in the collections of great people, and no evaluations are needed here. Therefore, I think that it will be very pleasant for us to have a conversation and to ask not only about stones and cutting, but about philosophy and some personal things that touch each of us.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts. And of course, I will be glad to tell you.
I will start by saying that I myself am from Smolensk. There is a very large factory there called Crystal. Now it is part of the Alrosa enterprise. And my grandfather worked at this Crystal. He used to take me to the stone cutting workshop. Probably all this love for stones, for cutting, for how they transform in the process. It comes from childhood like it does for all of us. And we already had a series of reports with Elgiz Fazuzyanov, with Marcel Yefimova, who recently won the jewelry Oscar at the last Hong Kong exhibition.
Yes, I met there.
All these people, they also each has their own small homeland. I know that you are from Kemerovo, Viktor. That's Siberia. It's a place of power, as we all know. And I wanted to ask you, what does Kemerovo mean to you? What does your small homeland mean to you? How do you feel about it now?
Siberia is indeed a special land with special people. On one hand, the harsh climate created conditions for hardening, physically and spiritually. On the other hand, Siberia often became a place of exile for highly spiritual, freedom-loving, independent people, and from them formed a certain kind of gene pool. Honest, benevolent, taciturn, hardworking, people who are not afraid of difficulties and know the value of words and actions. In my specific case, if I recall what was my starting point. Strangely enough, the starting point was mountaineering. In 1979, I went to the mountains for the first time, and we immediately encountered an extreme situation. One group, while reaching the summit, got lost, and we had to halt our preparations and organize search and rescue expeditions. And we all contributed some of our food supplies and warm clothing for the rescue efforts. And it was already then that the foundation was laid to give up something personal for a higher purpose, to help comrades. It was then that the concept of sacrifice first emerged, which deeply penetrated within me and largely shaped my subsequent worldview. Unable to let go of the personal, of my own ego, I would never have transitioned from craft to art.
Those traces of your small homeland, Siberia, where do you think they appear in your work?
In the early 80s, I remember it well, still quite young. Then I used to walk along the riverbank, along the railway, collecting various beautiful stones. The sound, I really liked them. And so having gone through a lot in life, having faced many difficulties, I still keep it in my mind. The image of a boy walking along the road, collecting stones to breathe life into them and give them to people.
That's great. Do you remember that day, Viktor, when you clearly realized that your path was to become an artist through stone cutting?
I don't remember the date, but I remember the moment, or rather the circumstances of that moment. It was 2006. I already had my own machine. I was already starting to cut stones, but it was just a hobby. Nothing serious. And then in 2006, I heard about stone cutting competitions in America. I was intrigued by it. I wanted to see how my stone looked at the level of masters. And I made a stone and sent it to the cutting technique competition in America. And when I first looked at my stone through the eyes of a judge and evaluated it according to the competition's judging criteria, I touched this perfection for the first time. I realized how beautiful stones can be. And having realized this, I couldn't do it any other way. And I realized the potential that stones can have, and I understood that I could dedicate my life to developing this potential. So that was the year 2006.
Also philosophical, right? Because the path is mastered by the one who walks it. It all started with love, then as a hobby, and then just the first step. And it apparently gave such a push.
Yes, exactly right.
Which of your works is the most valuable and the most difficult for you? Sometimes, for masters, the most valuable is the first work. Sometimes it is also the most difficult. And sometimes it's completely different. How did you assess it?
No, my first work was quite simple, not complicated. And somehow it went unnoticed. I met a person who cut stones, also as a hobby. Her main job was different. At one point she asked me, "Do you want to try?" I was scared, but I said yes. And I tried, it worked out. Then I tried again, and it worked out again. And then he said, "Well, that's it. You can buy your own machine and continue on your own." I bought the machine and I was afraid to touch it. For 8 months it stood there and I didn't touch it. Then somehow gradually it went further, further, further. And since 2006, as I already mentioned, I started taking it seriously after the first competitions. And then questions. There was a significant achievement. And this is probably one of my top 3 most significant awards. It was first place in the American competition in the Grandmaster category with a perfect score of 100 out of 100. When I achieved these results, I realized that this result could not be surpassed, only matched. But when you were the first, it's, I don't know, probably like winning the Olympic Games. I will remember that forever. As for the most challenging stone, it was a stone that was later entered into the Guinness Book of Records as the largest faceted spodumene. Before that, the largest spodumene was considered to be a stone faceted in 1959 by the legendary cutter Sinkankas. It is now in the Ontario Museum in Canada and weighs 1800 carats. My stone weighs almost twice as much, 51 carats. I worked on it for almost half a year. And then there were 3 more months of correspondence with the Guinness team to approve this record. Document collection, coordination. In general, there was a lot involved. Finally, I received the certificate. Officially amazing. And this was the second significant milestone. But the stone itself is very difficult to process. It is very fragile. It has perfect cleavage. It cannot be processed on coarse-grained diamond, only fine-grained. And when you have a large stone and a fine-grained disc, it takes a very long time. That's why it took me half a year to do it.
Patience, right?
Yes. The last thing I would like to point out is, for 2023, I received an award in Hong Kong in the form of a golden statuette. I prefer not to call it an Oscar. It was called the Extraordinary 40 Award as part of the Jewelry World Award. The company Informa Market, which organizes exhibitions in Hong Kong, Singapore, Bangkok, is one of the largest in the world. On the occasion of its 40th anniversary in the market, established this award. They selected 40 people who, in their opinion, made the most significant contributions to the development of the jewelry industry. There was the president of the World Jewelry Confederation and the president of the Diamond Bourses Association. The jeweler president there was Stephen Webster, and in such a company, the only gem cutter was Viktor Tuzlukov, our compatriot, whom we can be proud of indeed, and also very memorable. It was the first certificate in which the name of the gem cutter was indicated. This certificate was issued in May 2020. Perhaps it can be considered the official birth date of gem cutting as an art, when the master's name began to be listed alongside the gemological characteristics in the GIA certificate. For me, it was a historical milestone. And perhaps not just for me.
It's interesting that this can be marked as the birth of a new genre. Victor, if we use Marcel Christ's method, the first response is reactive. So pearl cutting or gemstone cutting?
Gemstone cutting, definitely.
Why?
You see, I don't consider pearl cutting, precision pearl cutting, as something promising, because pearl has low hardness and dust particles are usually either quartz or feldspar. That is, the hardness is either 6 or 7. And when we wipe the pearl, these dust particles leave tiny scratches. With mirror polishing, the surface facets very quickly become no longer quite mirror-like, and then the very purpose of precision cutting is lost. And I can't and don't want to do it any other way. That is, I feel sorry for those grateful customers who buy such pearls and then become disappointed when they see it no longer looks the same.
Speaking of the list of your magnificent works, Victor, it is undoubtedly vast, but I have favorites. It's the Heritage Collection, because I love to travel very much. For me, it embodies travel, certain impressions, and, of course, the fragility of the eternal France. It's when, a thought outruns your vision like a sunstroke, and you realize that this is exactly what you have. An image of a stone, a cubic zirconia arise, the stained glass windows of Notre Dame Cathedral. For me, it's very familiar because indeed, when I was still a student, I went there to Paris and visited the cathedral, trying to sketch the stained glass windows. And it's as if everything comes together but these are my feelings. Please tell us about these 2 collections.
Yes, I understand you perfectly. The fragility of the imperishable is indeed a remarkable stone. Strangely enough, it is one of the simplest in artistic artistic concept, yet at the same time one of the most complex in technical execution. The very idea of the stained glass rose of Notre Dame Cathedral, seen through a disproportionately wide platform, belongs to the French craftsman Lionel Bailly. I saw his first execution of this right after the fire at Notre Dame Cathedral, but the drawing itself seemed imperfect to me. And I found a photograph and made the most accurate drawing with maximum detail. And then, through a cutting diagram, I made it in stone. And by the way, that large kunzite I mentioned also has this design. 914 facets. It could be entered into the Guinness Book of Records, also as the most faceted kunzite. I just haven't gotten around to it. My second option was Viktor's drawing was already made with matte facets after polishing, but I transferred it to the crown. Then I didn't like it again, so I transferred it back to the pavilion, but this time I made it with matte facets. And here, attention, I added one element that, as far as I know, no other cutters use. The meeting points of the matte facets, which are actually trimmed edges between the facets. I decorated these meeting points with small triangles, which give a rounding effect. Some of the windows there seem perfectly round, but rounded. Facets are usually made convex or concave. I fundamentally do not use such a technique. That's a separate question as to why. I only have flat facets, only on a flat disc, rounded meeting points, made with flat facets. This is such an element, very interesting.
Continuing the series of your unique works, of course, there is much among them that one wants to take and talk about or highlight. We will talk about what I like. And in the series Philosopher's Stone, where it consists of 10 works, 7 are fancifully cut stones, and 3 stones are precise, geometric figures, a square, a triangle, and a circle. One of them is called The Great Sacrifice. And this touched me deeply because I am Orthodox. And with my husband and children, I go to church almost every week. And I generally think a lot about this topic, as we all do, I believe. Those who analyze what is happening around us generally analyze the meaning of life and probably somehow analyze the reason why we come into this world. There is such a thought about Judaism is in general. This is one of Christ's favorite disciples who, in fact, took upon himself this great sacrifice so that Christ could ascend the cross and endure all these sufferings, thereby partly subduing his pride. This was also sung by you in books and films, Scorsese, Andreev. And of course, this moment I drew a parallel, caught my attention. And I wanted to ask you, when you were doing this work, is it related in this way? Do you formulate it for yourself? Or maybe in a completely different way? This is very interesting.
You know, The Great Sacrifice is a very multifaceted work, well, like probably any object of art, like the entire Philosopher's Stone. Even the name Philosopher's Stone is ambiguous. It would seem, well, yes, a stone containing a philosophical idea. But if we remember what was called the Philosopher's Stone in the Middle Ages, it is something that turns base metal into gold. Now, if we understand metal as our consciousness and gold as its highest state, then these ideas, these philosophical concepts embedded in the stones, help transform our consciousness to its highest state through reflection and meditation. That is, this is another aspect of the Philosopher's Stone. So, returning to The Great Sacrifice, it was correctly said that the first 7 stones of this collection have different shapes. The second one is called the Drop of Life. It depicts a triangle with its apex pointing towards the center, and above it there are 3 arches. These are the 3 arches. They symbolize the 3 stages we need to go through to reach the point where our own ego dissolves into compassion for all beings. These 3 stages are to be continued: awakening oneself to the spiritual path, renouncing the dominance of material values, and transforming one's consciousness. When you become those ideas, you yourself become the ideas you pursue. That is, when the goal becomes your essence. Let me emphasize once more. Awakening, renunciation, transformation. Doesn't it remind you of something? Christmas, crucifixion, resurrection. Here they are, the last 3 stones: square, triangle, circle. If you read it in Latin letters, it will be DAO, Tao, or the path. Once again, returning to the great sacrifice. The element of the apocryphal version of Judas's sacrifice is present there. I heard about him, and he resonated in my heart, and I decided to rise above myself and the era by mingling with the living, defiling my lips to sacrifice Jesus the man, thereby saving the Lord Christ. As Vysotsky said, I meant something completely different. However, if you saw it, then it must be there. I was actually talking about the sacrifice we mentioned at the very beginning meaning renouncing one's personal for the sake of some higher goal.
In general, a human sacrifice.
That is, in this stone, the second stage is meant shown in the stone drop of life. In one of my tales, I said that to know your path, you must find it. To know your path, you must renounce it. To know your path, you must become it.
It seems to me that the cutting of the pearl is like quantum mechanics in relation to Newtonian mechanics in general, although both are the foundation of the universe. It completely changes all stereotypes. And for me, as a person who visually perceives certain signals, I see Malevich's black square there. And of course, if I talk about gem cutting, it's a riot of colors, this impressionism feeling. But pearl are more of a geometric story for me, probably a very philosophical one as well, where these squares are hidden, which not everyone can find. If I talk to you about pearl cutting, when you planned this work, did you want to reach one of the peaks, which would be attainable for you? Or was it just a challenge?
To be honest, I don't consider these as peaks at all. The first time I saw a faceted pearl was with our master, Eduard Akhmetshin. I found it unusual and I liked it, but I realized that you can facet quite different materials, including pearls, so why not? Just like you can, for example, make cabochons from moissanite. I don't understand why, but I mean, why deprive moissanite of its main advantage, dispersion? And when I saw this faceted pearl, I liked it and I decided to try it. I tried and it worked, but that was already after my first competitions. I could no longer do it poorly. At that time, I didn't know that it couldn't be polished to a mirror shine. That's why I succeeded. Subtitle. Now, by the way, I tried after a lapse of 10, 12 years, and for some reason I couldn't do it. Using the technology I used before, I can no longer do it. Now I use a different technology. But nevertheless, I met with Olischan in Germany. He highly appreciated this pearl compared to others who work in the market. For example, there are in Japan. The company specializing in pearl cutting is called Kamatsu Cutting Factory. Its founders, the director, exhibited their pearls at a competition in Hong Kong in 2012, where I was a judge, and I looked closely and understood the difference. I showed him my pearls. The hook was that he remained silent, like a true samurai, but he was very eloquently silent. But again, I repeat, this cutting is not durable, unfortunately. Ordinary stones are harder, more stable, more resilient, and that's why my heart just bleeds when I see how this polish deteriorates over time. Out of pity for the stones, I try not to do this anymore.
And the polish deteriorates. Is this something that needs to be mentioned for those who are not so well versed in cutting?
Yes, because as I said, if we just wipe the pearl, when we touch the stone, there's always a layer of grease on our hands. And these are the spots. Then it needs to be wiped off, because mirror polishing works as polishing only when the stone is clean. That's a separate issue. It's a very interesting question. The impact of polishing on the color of the stone is a whole topic for a separate lecture. Exactly. So the stone must be clean. And when we wipe the same pearl, dust particles scratch it. There's no getting around that. A cloth can never be completely clean.
It's soft, isn't it?
Yes. It has a hardness of 4. It's a very soft material.
About the series of works, Philosopher's Stone. Sorry, but we really love it. When I say we, I mean our team. Speaking of the series of works, many craftsmen would probably spend a lot of time in principle to cut just one stone from this series. You create entire collections, and it is beyond my understanding, my imagination, how it is possible to achieve this. Nevertheless, speaking of the Philosopher's Stone, thank you. These are unique things. And what do you feel? Do these stones drain your energy, or do they, on the contrary, give it? Where do you draw this energy from? And you sometimes thought that it's like magic, that these masterpieces are beyond any human perception. That is, sometimes even when I look at these works, I get goosebumps, precisely because I understand how difficult it is to create something perfect and philosophically fill it with thought.
Yes and no. I can't say that it empties me. You can feel empty when you give away something of your own. I haven't considered for a long time that I create something of my own. I can only convey what life gives me to pass on to people. That is to say, I can channel through myself the beauty, the perfection that exists around us, whether manifested or unmanifested, and express it in ways that are accessible for perception. So it will never run dry until the source of this inspiration runs dry. And the source is life itself. Life is inexhaustible. Sometimes it must be frightening, I suppose. But this fear quickly passes, and in its place comes admiration, reverence for the great harmony, whether it was successfully captured or not, or partially managed to express it in one's work, to touch upon it. As Vavinar said, quoting Voltaire, "The knowledge of beauty is a duel in which the artist screams in horror before being defeated."
That's exactly what I think I wanted to convey when I was asking. That is to say,
it's an overcoming. In other words, I am far from thinking that this is my creation. It's only my transmission. I saw something. And it doesn't matter what tool I use for it, stone, more music, word, poem, tale. It's simply the transmission of harmony expressed in something. I managed to express it in stone. For someone else, it's in a song. For another, in music. For another, in a painting. For another, in a sculpture. It's the same kind of art.
Victor, if you were told that you could leave only one of your creations as a legacy to your descendants, what would you choose?
Simple question. I would choose the tales. Strangely enough, it sounds, because it's also a kind of facet of a slightly different material. But there I managed to more fully express the depth of philosophical thought, which in stones is only just outlined, but in tales it's the quintessence. And not only children love to read and listen to them, but adults too. And I think you will see for yourself.
What would be the most balanced advice you could give me as a beginner artist and a novice jeweler artist?
Let me give you 2 pieces of advice.
Go ahead.
One is mine, the other is not entirely mine, but one that I have adopted and follow. The first piece of advice: don't be afraid of the impossible. When I met with Swiss cutters in Munich, I told them, "Gentlemen, esteemed, experienced," I said to them, "you are all more professional and more experienced than I am. There is only one difference between us. I am not afraid to set myself impossible tasks, and I am compelled to solve them. As a result, each subsequent task expands the boundaries of what is possible. I am not afraid that someone will replicate or reproduce my stones, because by the time they approach them, I will have already moved on. And what seemed impossible yesterday will be possible today and ordinary tomorrow, and you will move on." And the second piece of advice is a phrase from the first climber of Everest, Tenzing, RP Tenzing: "Be great and help others become great."
This is really great.
I have no secrets from my students, and I am happy when my students surpass me. This means my work is not dying, but developing, and it means I have not lived in vain.
Please tell me, what do you consider the art of cutting?
You know, I often hear this expression. I have even heard the term, the art of recutting. That is the ability to fully reveal the potential of the stone, to be continued. I do not consider it an art. Cutting has always been a craft, and this I consider a high degree of craftsmanship. It's not bad, it's good, but art is something else. Let's say, for example, a carver carved a dog out of stone. A beautiful dog, every hair, the eyes as if alive, everything is wonderful. Is this art or not? What do you think?
I think it's still closer to craftsmanship, although probably it would be important for him to be called an artist in carving in stone.
It's the same thing. An artist who paints portraits, photographic precision, just like a photograph.
That's what I don't like, you know. That's what I just...
Because that's not art either. Art should convey an idea. It doesn't necessarily have to be masterfully executed, although that's important too. Another example, I once saw a cabochon made of agate. In the middle, it was dark red, fading to black at the edges. And the title was The Last Glance. Some people might pass by and not notice it. A cabochon is just a cabochon, but someone might read the title, ponder it, and someone who has seen that last glance, a soldier returning from war, a hunter standing over a slain animal, over a dying beast. The one who has seen that last glance, as life fades and dissolves into darkness, will recognize it and will remember that wave of compassion that rises within their soul. That is art, just the title alone. Turned a simple stone into an art object. Why do I give names to my stones? Why do I write short texts for particularly important stones? To emphasize the idea, an art object must necessarily carry an idea. That's my opinion. And today, the people who truly create artistic works from faceted stones can be counted on one hand.
Tell us, for example, who you can, not everyone of course, but who stands out.
We've just talked about this for so long. I don't know anymore. I don't know.
In general, for a genre to continue, it must have followers, and you are working on this, I know.
They are emerging. They are already emerging.
You could say that these people exist?
Yes, they already exist.
Are they your students?
Not only, well, some consider themselves my students, even if they aren't, because they adopt my approach.
Inspired by you?
Yes, as a source of inspiration. That is also important, and that can also be considered mentorship.
And also please tell us about the Hong Kong exhibition and competition. You participate not only with your works, and have won many times, and you, I know, sit on the judging panel.
It was a single competition, organized jointly by UBM, the organizer of the Hong Kong exhibition, and the International Colored Gemstone Association. It was a competition for jewelry works and gem cutting. On the jury there was Dr. Schwartz from Stephen Webster and the president of the Colored Gemstone Association. I was the only one from the gem cutters. Well, basically we evaluated both the stones and the jewelry pieces there, and quite a few from Russia participated. I think there were 7 people, and I personally participated only in competitions on gem cutting techniques. In Australia, in America, in England. Oh no, I also participated in the European Open competition, which takes place in Munich. There, I also left my stones there several times.
We've already talked about the Guinness record, but can we discuss it more?
Now I'll just tell you what I made for the Dalai Lama. A stone that was symbolically depicting the Kalachakra mandala, 722. The facets of the stone corresponded to 722 elements of the mandala, that is, the deities of the mandala. Each facet corresponded to an element of the mandala. And there is a full description of the stone on 4 pages. That is, it is the essence of Buddhist teaching. Yes, but I faceted it and presented it to the Dalai Lama. Then I made a stone with Orthodox symbolism. The facets depicted saints, great martyrs, the 10 Commandments, and the 7 sacraments of the Church. I presented it to our Patriarch Kirill. The 3rd stone I made with Catholic symbolism. There were popes, there were cardinals, there were prophets, apostles as well. I presented it to the Pope. Next I planned to make a Muslim stone, a Jewish stone, a Hindu stone.
Ah, I see. So it's in progress, right?
Well, I haven't done it yet, haven't gotten around to it. The most interesting thing, it would be when we place copies of these stones next to each other and see that they are identical, or almost identical, although each carries its own symbolism. So the essence of this project is that the essence of religions, different religions, is the same. Only the interpretation is different.
So the main deep thought is essentially the same.
Well, the same 10 commandments, they are in Buddhism, in Christianity, everywhere. So the essence of religion is one.
Let me ask you an open question. Which religion do you belong to?
Strangely enough, it's an ambiguous question. Each religion can be viewed as a facet of a cut stone, through which you can see some essence inside. Many facets, one essence. As a gem cutter, I'm interested in the whole stone, but each stone usually has a table, the largest facet, through which you can see more. For me, that is Buddhism. Firstly, because it is a very altruistic religion. If Christians pray, Lord save us, have mercy, and so on, Buddhists say, may I achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all living beings. And then many aspects that Christianity does not explain, Buddhism does. Buddhism does not require unconditional faith. Buddha said, never believe me just because it was said by Buddha. Analyze, accept, or do not accept. And the first thing that the Dalai Lama started with during our meeting, he said, I want to caution those people who are present here from other religions against thoughtlessly switching from their native religion directly to Buddhism. Spiritual practice can be pursued within the framework of any religion, not necessarily within Buddhism. Consider, if your own religion is closer to you, follow it within its framework. I am not urging you to immediately convert to Buddhism. This tolerance, it also attracted me greatly.
Please tell us about your personal Guinness record and, in general, how did you decide to do it? This is another horizon that had to be expanded and, in general, left behind to move further.
Yes, this is another milestone in history. I recommend it. Guinness records. I have 3, and 2 are not under my name. Currently, Guinness does not work with Russians and Belarusians, so the last 2 records were registered under the name of the stone's owner. Although, I always thought, well, how is it if someone, Ryus, registered in the Guinness book, let's say the largest pancake. Logically, you should put the name of the person who baked it, not the one who bought the flour, right? Well, no. So far in the record book, there were owners of stones, and the categories were like the most expensive stone, the largest stone. I introduced another concept, the most faceted stone. Then I made, to be continued, a stone that contained 3,600 facets. There were 2 of them. One was synthetic, the other was natural, made from scapolite. Guinness does not work with synthetics, so I made it from natural material. The first stone was called an hour, or a drop of eternity, because there are 3,600 seconds in an hour, and the stone had 3,600 facets. It seems like a lot, it is a lot, but in the infinite ocean of eternity, it's just a tiny drop. Again, the ratio of the great and the small. And so, when I submitted the application, I wrote, the most faceted stone. I know that more than 1,000 facets no one has done yet. And here, when I was drawing the diagram, I got carried away and noticed it had already gone over 2,000, and they were still being drawn. In short, I stopped at 3,600. Guinness rejected my application. They said that different stones, different materials, different technology. It's one thing, for example, a diamond. Another thing, a sapphire. And yet another, a quartz. If it's a scapolite, name it as the most faceted scapolite, and then we will accept it. That's when I rubbed my hands and said, aha, next will be the most faceted quartz, the most faceted, and off we go. So in theory, I can set a record in each material. And so last year, at the end of the year, We managed to create a stone that received 2 records. It is the only stone in the world today with 2 Guinness records, both the largest and the most faceted. It's a Burmese peridot weighing 769 carats and having 1824 facets. Unfortunately, we cannot see it. The stone itself is in Thailand, but we can show photos and videos.
Subscribe to Dresier's social media. Don't forget about our new releases and that on our Telegram channel we have the most hot news, the most precious and unique knowledge. Yours, Elena Bulgarina.